Good morning to everyone out there, our listeners. We're here at Team Toyota. My name is Tom Mellon, your host for Justice for All. It's a show that I'm very, very proud of, and it's the only way that we could do this show is with all of the merits of our district attorney here, Jennifer Schorn, who brings wonderful prosecutors, detectives to study a lot of the cases that they're allowed to share now once they go through the legislative system, the judicial system. And happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa to whatever your religious background is. It's a wonderful time of the year, right, Jennifer?
It sure is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we're happy to have you. And we have Brittney Kern,
Good morning.
who's going to be sharing. Good morning. It is a good morning. Wake up without any aches and pains. And
It's a good morning.
I'm ahead of the game. You're right.
Well, thank you
But
for having us.
oh God, we're just so overwhelmed that we have this particular show, and it's because of your merit and all the work that you do in Bucks County to keep this entire village of occupants that we have safe and sound. And a lot has to do with our police officers as well, as you know. But working hand in hand with them, it's phenomenal, isn't it?
It really is, and I can't thank you enough. As mentioned, you host us, but it gives us an opportunity to share with the community some of the work that we do to make sure our community is safe. And as you mentioned, the police officers, I get to work with the best of the best in the county, and then I have the hardest working group of assistant district attorneys, deputy district attorneys, and chief deputies in my office. And Brittney Kern is at the top of that list. I mean, I don't know of anyone who's a bigger advocate for children who are abused and neglected and for victims of domestic violence. She gives her heart and soul to the job, and she is so talented. So I thought it was perfect to have her as a guest to speak to this one particular case because there's so many takeaways, and then to highlight, awareness for child abuse and neglect, both physical and sexual abuse. So really, it is an honor to have Brittney here, and you're so kind to always invite us to your
Oh,
wonderful show.
we couldn't do it without you, as you know, Jen. But I want to increase this awareness, especially, and make people aware who are listening today. You can stream this show anytime on Google, WBCB 1490 live stream, Justice for All, and all the library of shows that we have conducted over the years with Jennifer. You can, when you have time, you won't be disappointed, and you'll become more aware and knowledgeable to what the district attorney's office is all about, with their feats that they accomplish very well, the prosecutorial steps, and all the hard work and efforts that Jennifer has conducted and accomplished. It keeps this Bucks County area very safe. And if there's criminals out there that happen to hear about this show, just be warned that our police officers out there, we will find you and hunt you down if you're going to be in the Bucks County area. And you think that it's a nice, which it is, it's a pleasant community, all the townships, the boroughs. It is a beautiful county in Bucks, as Jennifer or Brittney will acclaim. But most importantly, we will catch you and we'll hunt you down, and then Jennifer will make certain that you'll be in the right place. We'll fit you into some nice accommodations so that you can be safe and sound and away from our environment. That's a promise. But today's a special show, isn't it?
It is.
It's phenomenal. Although we don't want people, and obviously we want people to become aware of the opportunity and signs that you can look for when a case like this occurs. This happened back in May or it started being investigated April of
Yeah.
2023.
In April of 2023 is when police became aware of this family's existence and really the existence of these 7 children.
Incredible. Shane and Crystal Robertson are sitting where they belong, and hopefully they'll rot there, as far as I'm concerned. Whenever you abuse children, as they did, and we're going to talk about these abusive, horrible acts that went on and on for a long time, it saddens me, and it saddens everyone. But we're going to be sharing some of the signs that you can look for if you see these type of conditions, or witness, or be aware, or you're aware of them. There's help. there's help, right?
Absolutely. And Tom, you said it so well. And in this case, and Brittney will explain the unimaginable facts of the case and how it came to light. But these kids were so isolated
Mm.
by design. And so, unlike what we typically see, we have teachers who are mandated reporters, youth coaches who are mandated reporters, people who are in the lives of children are by law mandated to report if they suspect a child's being abused or neglected. Well, that's great, and that's how it should be, and it's all of our responsibilities morally, but it's legally the responsibility. But when you have children who are quote unquote homeschooled and isolated, and there are wonderful homeschool programs. I'm talking about this particular family and the claim of homeschooling, and you have them so isolated, it really does take that kind of awareness and I mean, you'll hear, and Brittney will explain what the officers did and how they became immediately concerned, even though they weren't called out to check on the well-being of these children. So it's a great story, and Brittney, if you want to explain how this all came to light, I think it will captivate everyone.
Absolutely.
Sure, I can
Right from the
certainly do
beginning.
that. So in April of 2023, there is a trailer park organization up in the Sellersville area. And essentially what happened is that an unrelated neighbor in the trailer park noticed two children going and breaking into an abandoned trailer in that community. And that neighbor called 911, and police responded to see what was going on with the abandoned trailer and the children who were inside of it. Police came into contact with two of the children, and they ended up being two of the children of Crystal and Shane Robertson. They had actually broken into the trailer, went into this abandoned trailer to get blankets for their pet rats.
Oh, jeez.
Because they said their pet rats were cold and their mom and dad didn't have enough money to get blankets for the pet rats. It was heartbreaking. And ultimately, because the police were concerned, that they noticed the kids were very, very thin, wearing very oversized, dirty clothes, and mom and dad weren't home. They did the right thing. They stayed on scene, and they waited until they could get mom and dad back, and ultimately it sort of just rolled from there. They called children and youth, and initially when the parents came home, they said they only had 3 children. Children and youth came out, and they took a look inside the dilapidated trailer that Crystal and Shane were sharing ultimately with their 7 children, and they actually saw a pair of eyes looking back at them through a hole in the wall, and that's how they discovered there were 4 more children inside the house.
Oh,
And again, it just sort of all just snowballed from there.
Brittney, what were the ages?
So at the time they were discovered, the oldest was 16 and the youngest was 4.
God,
And they sort of ranged in age from there.
my goodness. No schooling, no medical treatment,
No.
no proper child rearing. And some of them, I understand, when I looked at the history of this case, didn't even know what their date of birth was.
That's right. Yep. So the oldest child, who was 16 at the time, she had gone to some kindergarten. And that was the extent of schooling for the 7 children. And that was actually in another state before they moved to Bucks County. We weren't even really able to determine specifically when they moved to Bucks County, because normally one of the things we would do is pull school records or, tax records or things like that, and none of that existed in this case. So we couldn't even pinpoint. We know, from before they were found, they had been in the county for at least a year, but up to 2 years. It was honestly unclear. It still is to us exactly how long they had been in Bucks County.
Yeah, records would be very hard to attain if there aren't any.
Right.
That's just it.
Birth certificates.
hmm That's just it.
Were some of these children born in the trailer?
Mhm.
I guess.
So we were able ultimately to find some birth records, but I believe most of the children, if not all of them, were born in Delaware State, and none of them had been born in Bucks County.
Oh my goodness. The neighbors, obviously, thank God that someone recognized this
Yes.
abuse that was going on
Yes.
for a long period of time, I would assume.
Yes, and the neglect was extreme. The children, I mean, the trailer they lived in was so dilapidated. It had one bathroom, but it's hard to even call it a bathroom. It didn't have any soap or shampoo or toothbrushes or any sort of like normal, basic hygiene that you would expect. One of the girls actually had maggots in her hair from the extent of how unwashed and just build up. Her hair was to the point where they had to shave her hair, shave her head
Oh my goodness.
completely. And so, luckily the neighbor who saw the breaking into the trailer in the neighborhood did call police, and we were so thankful for that, because that's how this all came to light. Otherwise, who knows how much longer it would have taken, and what could have happened to these kids.
Many people, when you hear cases that are occurring close by, are probably shocked to listen to this, thinking that this doesn't occur in Bucks County, but it does.
It definitely does.
It doesn't just occur in isolated regions where you would maybe perhaps anticipate it occurring more so. But here we are in Bucks County, and these are things that right under our eyes are happening.
And it happens, I mean, this was not a case strictly, born out of poverty. There is a very unique aspect to this case, and, I love when I see Brittney get mad, because I know that she's going to even, do a deeper dive into her
Of course.
case prep. But I think it's worth bringing up, counterbalancing the lack of care for the children. And the physician said, the first case of educational neglect I've ever
That she's been able to diagnose. Yep. And just like you said, not knowing that many of the kids didn't know their birth dates. I'm not sure any of the kids could read at any real level. They all ultimately were put in school, and they were all put 2 years, like 2 grades lower than they should have been based on age, and that was really only to keep them with kids who were sort of their age group, right? Rather than putting a 16-year-old, for example, in like a second grade classroom.
Of course.
But luckily the kids were removed from the house. I never went back to that trailer after that day in April of 2023. They were removed from their parents, and all 7 of them are thriving at this point. They are doing so much better
God
than I
bless
think
them.
anyone could have ever expected. They're with guardians who love them and care for them, and really make sure they are, living their best lives to the, greatest extent they can.
You don't want to see animals treated this way. These are human beings.
Well, that's the perfect segue, Tom.
It sure is. So this family had so many animals. I should have brought a list with me. I mean, they had 24 pet rats.
Oh
They
my
had
God.
2 dogs, a couple cats, a couple snakes. The mom, Crystal Robertson, her prized possession was this tegu lizard, and she loved this lizard. She had a paw print tattoo of this lizard on her, I think on her arm, tattooed on her arm. And she had a TikTok actually that she was very proud of that had videos of this lizard, including the one that broke my heart the most was a video of her actually brushing the lizard's teeth. And knowing that the kids did not have toothbrushes, one of the kids had, I think, 16 visible cavities, and he was 6 years old when he was discovered. So to just kind of juxtapose those 2 images is devastating, frankly. But they had countless animals, and for the most part, the animals were decently taken care of. The only food we could really find in the house was food for the animals.
And I understand that the refrigerator was padlocked.
It was padlocked, yep, with like a bicycle lock, basically. And the Crystal had the key to the padlock in her purse when police arrived. So mom and dad, Crystal and Shane, weren't at the trailer when police arrived. It wasn't until they came back and police went inside. They saw the padlock. They asked about the key, and Shane went and asked Crystal for the key, and ultimately went out to their car to get the key to then unlock the refrigerator. And there was really just food for adults and some animal food in the fridge.
No respect at all or concern about the welfare of the children, obviously. And with these how big was the trailer? I'm wondering, with all these animals running around and calling the rats pet rats.
Yes.
I don't know if it's the right word, but I guess that's how they rationalized it.
That's how they rationalized it, and it was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath trailer. Hard to call them bedrooms. Clutter doesn't really even describe it. Truly just things everywhere. There was no walking area in any of the 3 bedrooms. In the bedrooms that were really the children's bedroom, there were cages for the rats. There was animal feces all over the floor on a dirty mattress that laid just on the ground. And even the floor of the trailer had holes to the point where you could see the dirt underneath the trailer from inside. So
Of course.
it's
The
heartbreaking.
environment of the trailer park itself, I I have questions about that. I mean, how long did it take? I'm hoping it would be sooner, but how long did it take for residents to actually realize what was going on in there?
Yeah, I mean, so my understanding from police interviews of neighbors is that they really didn't have any idea. They knew that there were a couple kids who lived in the house, and that there were the parents who, the dad at the time he was initially arrested, he had a job. So they saw him come and go, and the parents together sometimes would deliver Uber food and things like that at night. So they would see them come and go, and sometimes see a couple kids running around outside, but for the most part they kept the kids really isolated, and so the neighbors, I think, truly had no idea what was going on. The kids didn't have friends, so it's not like they were, there were no play dates or anything that you would expect, some red flags to go up on.
Of course.
Just like Jen said about having a teacher who might call in a child line or things like that, there was no one like that in their lives. It was really just the 9 of them, the parents and the 7 kids.
What an extraordinary story that you're listening to here on WBCB 1490, Justice for All, with our District Attorney Jennifer Schorn. We're going to take a quick pause to identify some of our sponsors. Paul Muller, a word of thanks and gratification all the time for what he does, how he recognizes the value of these shows. It's not just about the car industry here. There's a Heroes program that we can talk about later, but it's about the concern that he realizes, and the importance of these types of stories right here in your neck of the woods. We're going to talk a little bit about vigilance too. That maybe we need to be more educated, all of us, to look for these outward signs, to try and capture it even sooner. But we'll return after a few moments with Brittney Kern and Jennifer Schorn, our district attorney. Don't go anywhere. There's a lot more to share about this, so that you'll know more about how to condition yourself and to be vigilant and watch for these types of outward signs. We'll return after a few moments.
There really is nothing like a home team advantage. That's why Team Toyota is the choice for your next vehicle purchase or service this season. With new Toyota models available for immediate delivery and over 100 certified used and pre-owned vehicles for any budget, plus service specials to keep you on the road to victory. Shop or schedule online at teamtoyota.net or choose one of our 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton. Are you part of the team?
Hi, this is Mayor Jeff Martin of Hamilton Township, inviting you to tune in to our monthly radio show, This Month in Hamilton. Video streamed live the 4th Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. at WBCB1490.com. We will be featuring various guests from Hamilton Township to keep you up to date on what's going on in Hamilton.
Are you a parrot head?
Wasted away again in Margarita.
Not that kind. That's more like it. If you're this kind of parrot head, don't forget to check out the Denny O Polka Show every Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon right here on 1490 WBCB and online at WBCB1490.com.
Thanks for listening in. Thanks for hanging in. We're right back as quickly as possible to tell you more in detail, as much as we can, about the conditions and this horrendous act of negligence, abuse, child abuse, most importantly. Let's talk a little bit about Shane and Crystal and their background. I know they're not from the area, and is there any criminal background with Shane? I know you were telling me he has a job. Had a job.
He had a job, yeah. He had a minor prior misdemeanor offense, but virtually no criminal background. Crystal didn't have any criminal background at all, so neither one of them had much contact, if any contact at all, with the criminal justice system.
Right.
If I could just jump in there,
Please.
Tom.
Yes.
Oftentimes, having specialized in child abuse prosecutions, both physical and sexual, oftentimes their first contact with police reveals years and years of unreported abuse or neglect or prior victimization, and often they don't have a prior record. It's the exception to the rule that we, catch a predator who had a prior record, or, and so if just the sheer math, the oldest child being 16,
Right.
you believe the neglect was ongoing for how many years, Britt?
I mean, if you consider that the oldest child was pulled out of kindergarten, and any homeschool efforts, when we say homeschool, I mean, I think over the years there were a couple workbooks that were purchased, but the 16-year-old could not really read. I think she had a Dr. Seuss book that she had memorized. So there was no homeschooling. I'd say at least since she was 5, right? That at least the school part of this hadn't been accounted for her.
It's incredible that the ailment that they didn't develop ailments with all the feces and the conditions that they were living in
right.
squalor. How many
Yes.
bedrooms were in the trailer? Maybe 2 bedrooms. They were probably sleeping on the floors.
Yep, there were. I think it was technically 3 bedrooms, but one was. I mean, all of them were just a mess. The nicest bedroom, and I use that word. It was not nice at all, but was the room that the parents slept in. But the rooms the kids slept in were just. There were things everywhere, and things for the animals, and the animal feces, as we mentioned, but also just toys, and there were broken doors in the trailer. There was a broken door, strewn across the mattress that was on the floor, for example, when police went inside. And so I think a lot of the kids would sleep on the couch, and just on the floor with their parents, or just really anywhere they could try to be somewhat comfortable.
Of course, no types of, of schedule of activities for
No.
children like this. They're just fighting to survive each and
Yeah.
every day, not aware that anything's wrong.
Yeah.
Especially when you were saying that when the police arrived and they were in another trailer and they were trying to rationalize as best that they could, innocent children, well, we're looking for blankets to keep our rats
Pet
warm.
rats. Yep. I think honestly, in some ways, the animal parts of this story have been sort of difficult for me. I go back and forth on how terrible it was that the parents were taking such good care of these animals, and not great care of the animals, but at least they were fed, right? The animals were being fed. But I do think these animals, especially the pet rats, actually helped the kids thrive in some way, because they had such a connection, especially to the rats, but to all the animals, that was something that was joy in their life, in their lives, was to have these animals available to them. And they really relied on their siblings too, because they had no one else. They didn't have classmates or any friends, or there were certainly no birthday parties or things like that. So those animals and their siblings were really what brought them some semblance of joy.
I'm wondering if these parents, Shane and I don't call them parents, but animals themselves, Shane and Crystal, did they allow or did they detain the children in the house or keep an eye on them all the time? Because you would think if the kids were outside, they eventually may have adapted, or you would hope that they would have adapted with other children of their age.
So they didn't detain them. They weren't, they weren't locked in, so to speak. They weren't often allowed to go outside, or it was limited how much they were, allowed to do that. Crystal did not work for at least the last several years, and so she was generally home with the kids pretty much all the time. Shane would leave and go. I think he had some sort of warehouse job prior to his initial arrest. And so Crystal was certainly keeping an eye on the kids. There was, I think, one friend that they sort of all shared in the trailer park that they sometimes would spend some time with outside, but certainly no one was ever allowed inside the trailer to see, how they were living, and they did their best certainly to keep them isolated from people
isolated.
around them.
Punishment, they call it punishment. These 2 rascals that are in prison now. The torture that occurred, that you were hearing from the children. Let's talk a little bit about that, but only because I want the listeners to be aware of the atrocities here.
Right.
Yeah, it was very sad. I mean, they would punish the kids for what they called, quote, stealing food. The kids would get so hungry that they would, steal, and again, I'm using that in quotes, but food from, that was Crystal's food. They sometimes Crystal and Shane would buy themselves ice cream sandwiches or things like that, and the kids would be so hungry they would take some of that food, and they would be physically beaten for that.
So you can imagine the mental abuse as well as the physical abuse. You've probably seen visual scars of some of the children, how they were tortured or
Yeah.
how they were whipped.
Mhm.
My God, uh, the prosecution part of this. I'm wondering. I'll have to ask this question. Did Shane, Crystal, one or both, seem surprised? Because they might, obviously, they need therapy. No matter how you look at it. I mean, it's not normalcy to see
not normal.
anyone act
Yeah.
that way. What was their reaction when they were arrested?
You know, it was interesting. I think that even through the whole prosecution period, which took a long time, frankly, to prosecute this case, Crystal, in her mind, I think, still sees herself as the victim. That, she was in a position in her mind where she did everything she could for these kids and just didn't have the ability to do better. That's just nonsense. I mean, public school is free, and as the judge rightly pointed out at sentencing, sending your kids to public school, they would have been fed at least 2 meals a day. They would have had access to other children. There would have been child line reports, I'm sure, from
Health,
teachers.
they would have been taken care of health-wise, medically.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I think Crystal was surprised and also just sort of aghast at the whole situation and in disbelief. Shane, on the other hand, I think he pretty quickly had an understanding of maybe even thinking like this day would come. I'm not sure if he ever knew this day would come, but he seemed to understand the severity of it more quickly, and just was a little less outrageous with his conduct in terms of things he was saying right off the bat. When the kids were being evaluated at the hospital later the same day they were found, Crystal was making it about herself, whereas Shane was, at least somewhat concerned for the kids and trying to calm Crystal down, especially while police were still there, so police weren't getting more concerned.
I have to ask this question. Was there any signs of sexual abuse with children? Because obviously that's another major concern when you see something, this type of activity.
We were really concerned about that. So the allegations of physical abuse did not come out right away. It took a few months of the kids being outside the house for them to start talking about the physical abuse. And when they did start talking about that, we brought them in for a second round of forensic interviews. And we specifically asked, in a non-leading way, but we always ask about body safety and things like that.
Of course.
And there is no indication of sexual abuse, thankfully. I pray that that's the case, but throughout our investigation, there were never any disclosures or allegations raised by the children of sexual abuse.
Thank God for
Thank
that.
God.
Thank God.
I mean, there's some type of relief to know that they weren't tortured that way.
Right.
Because
Correct.
my God, this will stay with each and every one of those children throughout their life. I mean, they're going to regress back and remember these things. That's where therapy is so important, right, Jen?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it blows my mind. I mean, as a prosecutor, as a parent, if my child has a bad day and I know about it, it's hard to put them on the school bus knowing, oh, they had a bad morning and this is going to be on their mind, and you worry about them, and or if they're facing a bully, you worry about, are they going to be able to get through this emotionally? And those are normal things our
They
kids
are.
have to deal with, and
Yeah.
that's normal. I can't even imagine once this was exposed and knowing every single day that your children were living like this, and for Crystal to be more concerned about her, and then for Shane to be more concerned about Crystal, trying to calm her down. It just literally defies human nature. It does not make sense. And what most importantly, the takeaway is that there are services out there. You don't lose your children simply because of poverty, if that was truly the issue. I watch the brilliant people who work at Children and Youth, our Child Protective Service Agency, do so much for our community. When someone is struggling financially, you don't lose your children simply because you're financially, facing a hardship. They just didn't care enough to pursue anything that was available to them, and that's the beauty of Bucks County. I mean, there are so many organizations that would have helped if they actually cared about their kids. And it defies common sense. Most child abuse cases do literally defy common sense. Like, you can't wrap your brain around how someone could be so heartless.
That's absolutely true. These cases this is a very extreme example of child abuse and child neglect, but these are never about prosecuting poverty. That's never what's happening here. It's not that someone is is poor or unable to take care of their children. It's, there shouldn't be animal fecal matter where the children are supposed to be sleeping, right? So,
Sure.
and that's something that can happen in any home regardless of income.
You're listening to Brittney Kern and Jennifer Schorn, our district attorney here in Bucks County. Boy, do I have more questions and more thoughts about their present status, how their behavioral activities may have improved, medically how they're doing education-wise. We're going to return after a few moments when we pause to identify our sponsors that enable us to do these wonderful shows so that we can educate and increase awareness about some of the abnormalcies that occur right here in Bucks County. So it happens everywhere. We'll return in a few moments.
There really is nothing like a home team advantage. That's why Team Toyota is the choice for your next vehicle purchase or service this season. With new Toyota models available for immediate delivery and over 100 certified used and pre-owned vehicles for any budget, plus service specials to keep you on the road to victory. Shop or schedule online at teamtoyota.net or choose one of our 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton. Are you part of the team?
Are you a parrot head?
Wasted away again in Margarita.
Not that kind.
Oi dana, mother to papuga.
That's more like it. If you're this kind of parrot head, don't forget to check out the Denny-O Polka Show every Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon right here on 1490 WBCB and online at WBCB1490.com.
Opinions matter, and so does yours. Hi, I'm Joe Fabrizi, inviting you to join us every Monday at 1 p.m. for Opinions Matter, right here on 1490 AM WBCB. Opinions Matter is now live streamed at WBCB1490.com. We want to hear from you because your opinion does matter.
Thank you for staying with us through that pause, identifying our sponsors. We're back here with very important Brittney, who does this work professionally in Bucks County under the direction of our district attorney, Jennifer Schorn. Brittney, we still have a lot of things that we can talk about so that the listenership can understand the values that hopefully people will learn when you see these types of things occurring. But the development that's at present, is there any development? The police officer, obviously, or the detective that handled the case. Let's talk a little bit about those
Sure. So
categories.
I was lucky to work with Detective Rick Dean of Penridge Regional through this case. He was great. He and I worked together in brainstorming more things we should be investigating. It was something you mentioned earlier about when we were talking about records and how long they had been in Bucks County. Sometimes it's harder to investigate something that doesn't exist. So he did a lot of phone calls and a lot of exploring of just making sure, there aren't school records for these kids somewhere in Delaware State, and that
Yes.
there aren't, some medical records somewhere that, because we want to know those things. Obviously, if the kids had been in school, we certainly don't want to be prosecuting, and I don't want to be submitting to a judge that they hadn't been. And so he did a really great job and really lived this case with me, but nothing compared to what these kids lived through. The kids really are doing so well at this point. One of the greatest updates I heard was that they are starting to form, and really have formed now, their own sort of personalities, because even before this they didn't have enough exposure to things to have real personalities or have interests, things like that. And so it's the 7 kids, it's 6 girls and 1 boy, and some of the girls have become what their guardians would say are the stereotypical like girly girls. They're really into like perfumes and lip gloss and boys and spending time with their friends and going to the mall and just doing the things that you would expect,
Everyday activities, right?
yes, the most basic
Normalcy.
things. One of the girls, the second oldest girl, really wanted to get a summer job this past summer. Things that were just normal things that teenagers and preteens should be experiencing, and they're finally getting to do that, which is amazing.
That's incredible when you think about that, because you wouldn't be surprised if it went the other way, where they were just depressed and they couldn't come out of the type of atmosphere that they lived for so many years. So it's just 6 girls and 1 boy.
It is, yep.
My
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
That one boy, I mean, I'm sure he had his hands full with the 6 girls and
Yeah.
running around the house all day.
Yeah.
I'm a woman who had 3 brothers.
There you go.
I know
Yeah,
the
so you know what it's
opposite.
like
I know
when
it's
you-
like the opposite.
Yeah.
But to Brittany's point, I mean, these kids are thriving thanks to the amazing people, the intervention, and the amazing people. Every victim of a crime, even if it's not charged, is available to have free counseling, and their loved ones are through our advocacy groups here in Bucks County, Network of Victim Assistance Nova. Children and Youth, the Child Protective Service Agency, when they're involved, I mean, their goal is to make sure that children are cared for. Their goal is not to try to destroy a family's, unit if there's struggles. But in this case, obviously, this is criminal behavior that's beyond, reproach. There's no point of return. But, the fact that these kids were, it was not easy in the beginning.
No.
There were some serious struggles.
Yes.
But it's thanks to the people that's their mission to make sure that kids thrive. These kids are thriving. So it was medical neglect, obviously, physical neglect, but and dental neglect,
Dental, yes.
and then educational neglect,
Yes.
and then indications of physical abuse. It's like the trifecta of neglect and abuse.
Yeah.
Well put.
It was really hard, and from the kids' perspective, their parents were the only adult figures they really knew, and so when children and youth got involved, when police got involved, when they went for, I mentioned the forensic interviews, that's something that's done through Network of Victim Assistance, and they're, we use these forensic interview services for child appropriate, age developmentally like appropriate interview skills in cases where there are concerns of neglect or sexual abuse, or where a child might have witnessed something in a criminal case, and they did not trust the interviewer the first time. They downplayed. They said they went to school. They said they took school buses every day.
Defense mechanisms.
Right.
Exactly, and really trying to protect their parents. Even the 2 girls who had gone into the other trailer, they begged the police officers not to call their parents, and told the police before their parents got there it was not their parents' fault. They were, I think, trained really to protect their parents.
They were afraid of the punishment.
Yeah,
They were.
conditioned to protect the parents. It's like so telling as to the parents' knowledge that they were abusing and neglecting their kids, that they even went as far as insulating themselves from criminal consequences by training.
They probably started thinking, Jenna,
Yeah.
oh, if they're in trouble, we're in trouble because we're
course.
going to get punished.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
of course. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And I think the parents really made the kids afraid of the outside world.
Yes.
And just in such a big way. One of the girls who went into the other trailer told police immediately upon meeting police that she had social anxiety. I don't think she knew really what that meant, but I think the parents had sort of ingrained in her that the world is scary, people are scary, you can't trust other people, and so they didn't. And so prosecuting this case was difficult, especially at the beginning, getting the kids to trust me and to trust Detective Dean and the other police officers, and to trust children and youth, and luckily children and youth had just their greatest worker working on this case, who was amazing and really gave her heart and soul to helping these kids and building trust with them, and she did. They love her, but it took time, and it took a lot of time for them to trust her and to trust everyone else who was trying to help them.
For the sake of our listeners, because I know they're wondering how, when you're dealing with children that were neglected so bad and emotionally, and they realized, if I say anything, I'm going to get punished. How did that go over well? The interviews with the children.
Yeah. So sometimes,
So that the listeners understand.
absolutely, and when we're end up sometimes, and luckily this case didn't end up in a jury trial, but this is sometimes we have to educate our jurors too, that the kids lied in their initial interviews, and a lot of times we just have to give these kids time. We have to give them time outside of the home, and no one is coaching them now once they're outside of the home of what to say or what not to say, but you just get some time to be removed from that, and to start to realize that what was happening wasn't normal, because these kids had grown up. They truly didn't know anything different. We we knew early on that, in their initial interviews, many of them said they took school buses. We knew they weren't taking school buses. When they were asked what their favorite subject was in school, I think all of them who got that far in the interview said math, and then couldn't tell us really what math was or what addition was, or basic things like that. So the kids
sad.
were sort of trained,
So sad.
and we knew obviously at that point that this wasn't accurate, and there were no school records too. We knew at that point.
So obviously the defense attorney had this ammunition, as bad as I want to say, as horrible as I want to put that. But if there's so many inconsistencies,
Yes.
how does the judge react to these inconsistencies based on the law itself?
Yeah, and that's hard. And in this case, there were two defense attorneys because each parent had their own attorney, and they have a job to do, absolutely.
Of course they do.
And it's a very important job. But it does make the prosecutor's job harder and law enforcement jobs harder when victims of crimes, children especially, are inconsistent with what they're reporting. And it really falls, I think it falls on the prosecutor, on our office, to educate whoever our audience is. Whether in this case, luckily for me, it ended up being educating our initial judge for the preliminary hearing levels, and then our common pleas judge, and neither one of them needed much education at all, really none at all in this case, but just explaining.
They were, excuse me, Britt, for the
No,
interruption. They were
please.
both happened to be former prosecutors
Right.
too, so that
Thank
helps.
God for that.
My,
Right.
my
That does
apologies.
help.
No, not at all. But really just making sure the judges at each step of this saw the full picture of what was going on. In addition to what the kids were reporting, we also knew the dental records, for example, and two of the kids, the one child especially, needed emergency dental surgery when he was removed from the home, and had all of the visible cavities and things. And so, when you sort of put everything together and when you don't look at things in a vacuum, the picture starts to come together for sure.
Absolutely, and the cooperation there on both sides, with the defense attorneys being former prosecutors.
Oh, the judges.
Oh, the judges.
Excuse me,
Oh,
Tom. Yeah,
that's
the
all right.
judges.
Sorry.
When Brittney was saying at the first
yes.
threshold, the prima facie, and then the judge that presided over the guilty pleas were both. So didn't take much educating.
That was helpful.
Yeah.
That was helpful.
The judge actually, in the common pleas level, who did the sentencing ultimately, she used to work for a children and youth agency, I think in another county,
Yes.
right? And so she had a lot of knowledge of
Experience.
It's interesting, to the point you made, Tom, and Brittney kind of elaborated on. I've found this in my 25 years. 90% of the time when we do a child forensic interview at the CAC, at the Children's Advocacy Center, excuse me, it's in response to a disclosure of some sort. So the child was ready to tell someone that I'm being sexually abused, or I'm being physically abused, or I'm
Yes.
not being fed. 90% of the time, it's because they were ready. So we often are much more successful in those interviews because the child already got to put their toe in the water and trusted someone to share. When the evidence is ahead of the disclosure, that is when it is so challenging, and you need a talented prosecutor and detective to think out of the box, and you need to be prepared and have the guts to be able to say, I can explain this to a jury, because the child isn't ready. I mean, 10 years from now, maybe one of those children would have found a trusted friend and said, I spent my entire childhood being neglected and abused, and we'd be ready then to be able to unpack that statement. But it is bar none our biggest challenge, and those interviews that are done at the CAC, the Advocacy Center, are non-leading, non-suggestive, by reason, because some defense attorney is going to suggest we coached them.
Yes.
And that is not it. It's actually quite the opposite. And then the team, the multidisciplinary teams behind it, well, it used to be behind a two-way mirror. I'm showing my age, but now it's behind, with surveillance into the other room,
Of course.
the TV, in the other room. The child sits with one interviewer, but so that they're not telling the police officer, the prosecutor, the children and youth worker, the advocate, from the CAC. So they tell one person, and we as a team are all watching the interview and can help kind of ask some pointed questions through the interviewer during a break. But it's a proud thing we do because it maintains the integrity of the evidence.
Yes.
And also doesn't re-traumatize the child as best as we can avoid.
True. Circumstantial evidence, I mean, it
Yes.
was obvious. Physical evidence, well, I guess it's just the marks or maybe bruises from the children, and having them reveal the ugly circumstances, how it occurred.
Right. Yeah, and the condition of the home certainly helped us prosecute the case, right?
obvious.
And things like that. But yeah, a lot of it was relying on the kids and what they were reporting, and that was especially true for the physical abuse allegations. Really, the only proof we had of that was what the children reported, and some of the kids had to testify at an early stage in this case against their parents in order for us to be able to establish that enough to keep the case moving forward, which was devastating. It was
Great.
heartbreaking.
Bree, we're going to take another quick pause, but how much time do we have? Because I'm loaded with more questions. How long? About there. So when we come back, for the sake of our listeners, let's talk about their development once again. Do they get to see one another? I know that, and I think it's important to expose this as well, or to reveal to our listeners, that the parents are forbidden. They're not to be able to touch or make contact with their children until up to age 18, and then even then, therapy is involved.
Yep.
And
Yes.
a lot of important issues that we'll cover over the next 10 or 12 minutes. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Justice for All. I'm Tom Mellon, your host. Jennifer Schorn, our district attorney, and Brittney Kern. I can't thank you enough so eloquently, and as it continues to explain everything about these circumstances. We'll return in a few minutes.
There really is nothing like a home team advantage. That's why Team Toyota is the choice for your next vehicle purchase or service this season. With new Toyota models available for immediate delivery and over 100 certified used and pre-owned vehicles for any budget, plus service specials to keep you on the road to victory. Shop or schedule online at teamtoyota.net or choose one of our 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton. Are you part of the team?
Are you a parrot head?
Wasted away again in Margarita.
Not that kind.
Oj dana, malo to papuga.
That's more like it. If you're this kind of parrot head, don't forget to check out the Denio Polka Show every Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon right here on 1490 WBCB and online at WBCB1490.com.
There really is nothing like a home team advantage. That's why Team Toyota is the choice for your next vehicle purchase or service this season. With new Toyota models available for immediate delivery and over 100 certified used and pre-owned vehicles for any budget, plus service specials to keep you on the road to victory. Shop or schedule online at teamtoyota.net or choose one of our 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton. Are you part of the team?
We're back with Justice for All, and for the sake of time, there's still some very important bits of information about this case that we want to share. Jennifer, I'll get right back to you as far as the children being raised in 2 homes,
They're being
only a
raised
mile
in 2
apart from one
homes,
another.
About a mile apart, yeah. So
Good
the
stuff.
7 kids get to see each other all the time, which is great. And I keep using the word thriving. That's the best word I can find. But when I just love getting updates of hearing how they're doing, and by all accounts, they're living very normal lives, which for considering where they came from is, I think, more than thriving under the circumstances.
That's phenomenal. We spoke a little bit at break time about Crystal trying to reach out to some of the kids.
Yeah, so there had been bail conditions during most of the time that we were prosecuting this case where Crystal and Shane were not allowed to have contact with the kids after a certain point. And Crystal continued to try to have contact with them. We actually litigated a motion because she was trying to have contact with them. I think the most egregious example of this, though, came at sentencing. She came to sentencing. There was still no contact order in place. The judge had made it very, very clear through the whole proceedings, you're not to have contact with these kids. You're not to have contact with their guardians, to have contact with them. You're not allowed to do any of these things. Crystal, when she came to sentencing, brought with her a bag of books and other items that she asked to be delivered to the kids. And that's not super atypical, I'd say, especially in cases where, it involves a family unit. And so the items were given to the children and youth worker who was involved in the case. And I think it was probably a month or so after sentencing, the children and youth worker gave them to the kids. And it turned out that Crystal had written notes to each of the
I was
kids.
afraid of that.
Yeah, each of the kids. And, the notes were, I think an outsider reading them, they would seem not that bad, but reading them in the context of the case and the prosecution and knowing there was a no contact order, things like save all your hugs for mommy, Crystal was sentenced to 8 to 16 years in state prison. She will be spending at least 8 years in state prison, and she only had a few months of time credit time, so she has the vast majority of that still to serve. So to be giving a letter to an 8-year-old, for example, saying save all your hugs for mommy when mommy's going to be in jail for the next 8 to 16 years, that's really manipulative. And it still just showed that Crystal, in her mind, this was about her being the victim. There was a no contact order in place at that time, and so we filed a motion to hold her in contempt of court.
Good.
As a result of that. That was sort of our avenue of holding her responsible, because during sentencing we didn't know that this had happened, and she actually had a whole year added to her sentence as a result
of it.
as a result of those letters.
Boy,
Yeah.
I love that judge.
Yeah, it showed.
Yeah.
It was-
Yeah.
yeah.
And it just she just has no regard for the rule of the court. The judge had made it super clear, you cannot have contact, and Crystal, in her mind,
Right.
it's about her, so
Yeah.
she didn't care.
Directly or indirectly, and that was indirect because she's writing notes to the kids.
Very
First-
calculated.
Very
Yeah.
calculated.
Yeah.
Isn't it cold? And
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing. If I had a parent in a situation like this, that's the last thing I would allow. Me personally, I don't want these kids to be attached to the memory of anything
Right.
in that
Right.
house.
Yes.
Let's
They need
start
to-
fresh.
They need to move on. They need to, be able to form their personalities and make friends at school and go to school dances and have summer jobs and do all these things and not be thinking about, how mom and dad kept them from all of that their, whole lives until police found them.
It's
Sure.
heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
It
you know.
really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Let's tell the listenership about some support that's available for them. Phone numbers, who they could call if they have any signs of abuse, negligence that are occurring. How they could get some assistance and help. And if they want to remain anonymous, that's fine.
There's a 1-800 number. If any listener suspects abuse, and the key thing is suspect. You don't have to
Right.
have proof
Right.
beyond a shadow of a doubt. You don't have to have proof at all. Let the experts determine that. But you call Childline. I think it's 1-800 Childline. But if I'm mistaken on the actual number, there's a free toll-free number, and online you could do an online report for free to Childline, and that will direct. The receptionist who answers the call will ask the appropriate questions to determine what jurisdiction the children are living in, where the concern is, and then they'll notify the police, our office, and children and youth if it's a familial member that's suspected of abusing or neglecting a child. So it keeps it simple. One main number
Right,
or
sure.
online Childline, and it essentially tags in all of the appropriate experts to go out and ascertain whether or not a child is in danger, whether welfare is of concern. So we just have to encourage everyone. You can do it anonymously.
That's what I'm
That is-
loving that.
Yeah, if a neighbor really, I get it. In this day and age,
Sure.
people are
Retribution.
afraid to honk their horn at another driver
True.
because they fear they could be gunned down because of
Right.
some extraordinarily aggressive acts that we see on the news. So I get why neighbors may be hesitant. That's why the anonymity this provides is key.
Perfect.
And you will not be called as a witness. The experts will be. You will not. We will not track you down. So it's so important. We go out to schools now, and I want Brittney to chime in as well. But, one of the things we do as an office, but in conjunction with NOVA, our network of victim assistants, they educate kids on being upstanders. We tell kids to be upstanders if you suspect, a friend is being targeted as, bully or subject to exploitation, abuse, whatever. We got to remind the adults, that we're mandated by law, but, it shouldn't require a law to tell you to do what's right and to be an upstanding person.
Absolutely.
So
It's a
yeah,
responsibility.
It's a responsibility. Yeah.
I mean, these these kids lived through so much prior to police becoming involved, and knowing that, someone, I don't know if anyone previously had some red flags. I suspect there were some red flags, here or there, especially in retrospect, looking back, right? But, luckily, when police got involved, this turned around, the lives of these kids. But this could have happened sooner. And there are certainly other cases. This is a really bad case, but this is certainly not the only case of its type. And we just want to make sure all the kids in the community are safe, and I think we're lucky, frankly, to have Jen as our DA, because that's her focus is making sure kids are safe and everyone's safe, but especially children in our community.
Absolutely. As an advocate of this this group and this agenda, you can always give me a call, WBCB 1490 as a talk show host here for Justice for All at 215-768 6505. I'm a retired police officer. I can provide the channel so that you will be heard, and it will be anonymous. 215-768-6505. This way I'll feel good if you call, and I can help in any way to abolish this type of heinous act that occurs with children. Just terrible. Your background, let's talk a little bit about that for just a couple minutes.
Sure. I've been with the district attorney's office for about 6.5 years, almost
God bless
7
you.
years.
That's
yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's been a really it's a hard job, but it's an amazing job. And getting to prosecute cases like this and know, I had some very small part, but some part in helping make sure these kids are okay and can thrive moving forward and have normal lives moving forward is amazing. There's no other job that I know of, at least, that gives you that opportunity. So I'm very grateful.
Absolutely.
I'm going to disagree with Brittney on one point. When everything she said, I agree, except the very small part. She's a huge part. And, she could, and in fact was, in the private sector, I'm sure, making a lot more money. But
God
she
bless you.
chose and sought this job and office out when our friend Matt Weintraub was district attorney.
Right, sure.
And, has been the most amazing public servant, because it's bigger than the job. It's personal to Brittney, and I witness it, and it takes a toll sometimes on us. You hear this day in and out. You're immersed in it. You're looking at the photos, and we've only scratched the surface on this case. And then you meet with the children, and you see the, roller coaster of emotions they're on, and that can affect you. But so it takes someone with a lot of strength to do the job and do it and talent to do it so well. But so that's where I disagree with her. The only point.
I do too.
Well,
Sorry, but not sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, but not sorry.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. You have a wonderful heart.
Well, thank you.
It's obvious. And for our listeners to understand that there are people who can help when you witness, and it's our responsibility, as Jennifer had mentioned, to if there's any inkling, give us a call. The 800 hotline.
Yeah, child line.
Yep, the child line. Or you can call me, obviously, Tom Mellon, and I'll get right to it. And I have the right people who will investigate and dig deep to prevent children from being neglected. That's more important. That's the most important thing.
Most important. They're the most vulnerable among us.
Oh my
God. It's our duty as a society to make sure that our children are protected and safe and cared for.
Right. Allow them to live in normalcy as best possible.
Absolutely.
And it's great to hear that these children are just within a mile of each other.
Yeah.
How great is that?
That's wonderful. My siblings, and I know you're the same, they're everything. They're so important to me, even now at this stage in my life. And so, to know that the 7 of them are still so close.
Yes.
That's the best, update.
Absolutely. And
to
for
date.
them, there is a Santa Claus at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right around the holiday
That's
season.
right.
They're in the warmth of a great atmosphere with two of the set of parents that are rearing them properly. And it's just a great end of this conversation to know that there was justice that was served, justice for all, the reason
There
for
you
this
go.
show.
Absolutely.
And that we will not tolerate.
No.
When we find out something like this that is occurring, we will not tolerate that type of injustice. Well, that's a wrap.
Thank you, Tom, for
Jen,
everything.
as always, we're looking forward to the next show, which will be in another couple months. And hopefully, Brittney will bring you back. We'll have a lot more to talk about right here on WBCB 1490. We want to thank Paul Muller again for being the sponsor of these shows. Let's Go Places, which is the end of the month, when we talk about the increasing awareness of our police, fire, and military. I can't believe I've been doing this for 12 years now.
Wow, 12 years. That's amazing.
It goes by, right, Bray? It goes by quick, doesn't it? It's incredible.
That's wonderful.
So hopefully we'll be here for another 12 years.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a great thing. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy Kwanzaa. Whatever your background is, we wish you the very best with your family and friends. Smile, enjoy the warmth of your family as these children are. And I can't think of a better way to end it.
That's perfect.
Absolutely.
So until next time, be safe, stay well. Jerry, I'm coming home to walk the dog in a little bit. And most importantly, God bless America.